What's going on, guys? It's Jack here, taking a look at another NBA draft prospect, looking at Terrance Ferguson, the wing prospect, who everyone thought would be coming from Arizona, who originally committed to Alabama, and as a McDonald's All-American, took the less traveled path and went to play basketball in Australia, in the National Basketball League there for the Adelaide 36ers. He played in 30 games there, and in 15 minutes a game averaged 4.5 points, half an assist, just over 1 rebound, and he shot 45% from the field and about 38% from 3. Now, Ferguson just turned 19 years old, and therefore those numbers actually are pretty good, because you got to consider, yes, next year he's going to be playing in the NBA against grown men, and he was playing against grown men in the Australian Basketball League, and yes, they're not as talented, obviously, as the NBA players, but it still shows that he can stand with the strength that these professionals have. And at 6'7", with a 6'9" wingspan at 185 pounds, he's a bit of a string bean right now, for no better term. And he needs to obviously put on some strength, but he was able to stand up and battle with these stronger players. Now, granted, I do think Ferguson was more athletic than a lot of players that you'll see in the Australian Basketball League. His no-step vertical was only 28.5 inches, but his max vertical, where you're allowed to take a couple steps there, is 38 inches. And so, therefore, you look at a guy like him, he doesn't have that quick twitch athleticism, but he can build it up. If he gets a step or two, he is very explosive, and therefore he's a guy who is able to utilize cutting to the basket for big finishes, for dunks or lay-ins at times, because he was able to get that burst to the basket. He's got that good straight line burst that you look for. And Ferguson is a guy who, he's got a good jumper, evidenced by that 38% from 3, and is a guy who he does have a little bit of a mid-range turnaround. He obviously can shoot the 3. He can shoot it off a 1 dribble, 2 dribble pull-ups. So he has a bit of a varied offensive game, but for the most part, he looks best when he's set up by someone else. And so he's not the best offensive creator, and he doesn't, evidenced by the half an assist a game, he's not really a playmaker for other players. Now, on the defensive end of the court is where, you look at him and you say, this could be, the next 3-and-D type wing, but that long body, those long limbs at 6'9" wingspan, and at 6'7", he does a really good job of guarding, 1s and 2s. He struggles strength-wise with 3s and 4s, but if he gets stronger, he's going to be able to guard those guys too. And he's a little bit quicker laterally than I initially expected, and he is stronger than he looks, but he still needs to, obviously get stronger. But laterally, he's a bit quicker, though he sometimes guesses wrong, and he's easily, misdirection tends to, mess him up, and he'll take the wrong step and then have to recover. Thankfully, he is so long, so he is able to recover in a lot more situations than you would necessarily think. And, some weaknesses for Ferguson. Obviously, I've mentioned the strength. He does, even though I think he's quicker laterally than I thought, he still needs to improve that area and, be able to play in a lower defensive stance. That's really what will help the most in that situation. He plays too high at times, and I think that's partially because of strength and partially just because he needs to get used to playing with his body. He's so long that it's going to take him a little bit of time to mature and really lock in. But if he does, he could become a really good defensive player, especially on the perimeter. Rebounding-wise, he needs to do a better job boxing out, but he flashes some potential in that aspect. And really, the one area where I have concerns with Ferguson is just game IQ and game awareness on both ends of the court. It just needs to be better in terms of knowing his role, knowing where to be, especially on the defensive end with help defense, and knowing when to rotate more often. But overall, I think Ferguson's a guy with, he's got good potential at the next level. He's only 19, as I said, so, that transition to going to play in Australia as basically a high school kid or a guy who would have been a one-and-done guy, it's a major transition, and the fact that he did play well, he didn't play outstanding, but he played well. He held his own. Is a good sign for his transition to the next level, and you think that, he could be a guy who ends up developing into a solid 3-and-D rotational player. Could be a starter, could be a guy off the bench, but definitely worth a pick in that 10 to 20 range, if you ask me. And depending on your team, he's a guy you take if you're trying to take a more of a risk. You're taking more of a gamble. And so therefore, certain teams, maybe Atlanta looks at him to add to their wings because he's a guy who could develop into being, better defensively than a guy like Hardaway Jr., or just come off the bench and be a better shooter than a guy like Thabo Sefolosha right now. But there's definitely several teams that could use a guy like Ferguson, who does have a bit more of a boomer bust potential than some of the other wings in this class. But guys, let me know what you guys think about Ferguson, what you've seen from him in the comments below, what other prospects you want to see me profile. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'm out.